Alright, so I had just been, this one just kind of came, like, really recently, where I was, thinking about, Around Midnight recently for a reason. I think it's all the Scorsese talk.
Makes sense.
We've been doing with Silence and stuff like that. And then Around Midnight kind of came to me. And I was, no! It was the, Taxi Driver anniversary screening. And everybody was talking about how Scorsese is a great actor when he's actually in movies.
Mm-hmm.
And I was bringing this movie up to people and saying, like, yeah, Scorsese actually plays a part in this, when he didn't have anything else to do with it. And then it never got out of my head for like the past month. So, and then I had Bird on standby, so I was thinking, we'll just do these. And it looks like they're playing back to back on the cases if you put them together. So, so yes, while it's on the brain, we're gonna go ahead and start with Around Midnight, which is this is the one I was telling you. I guarantee maybe 2 people will see this video or have any interest in it, and maybe those 2 people will really appreciate it, because these movies do have their followings. They're just in their own crowds, not exactly vast, despite the fact that this is obviously it has they're both Oscar-winning movies, but this one in particular got a Best Actor nomination, which is a big deal. And Around Midnight is in Paris in 1959, and we're following it's a fictional musician, but he's played by an actual musician, and it's one of those cases where even though he's playing a fictional person, you can tell kind of how personal the role is, and how much all these real emotions about this area are coming through in this performance and give it the authenticity that it has and the power that it has. Because Dexter Gordon is the actor and the character is Dale... Oh my god, I just blanked. Turner? I want to say? You're usually looking at Wikipedia, and we can answer these much quicker. So, and it's basically just his story of him being, yeah, it reads, even though it's a fictional character, it very much plays like a biopic, where it's, you know, the tortured musician that struggles with alcoholism and, you know, drug abuse, and he's getting to the point to where he just can't get the music right, and it's just really, really tearing him down in every way. And then he comes across a French fan. He has like a little following that's kind of always outside the clubs when he comes out. And it's just like this tiny little, you know, group of people. But there's one French guy in particular who is played by Francois Cluzet, I think is his name. The guy from The Untouchables. And he's taking care of his daughter, who, because her mom didn't want her, or mom doesn't want her, or whatever, and they're having a hard time reuniting with her, so they just kind of live by themselves, and then they take him in, and he lives with them, while he tries to get him kind of back into that, you know, prime area he was once in. You'll notice even though I don't believe Scorsese had anything to do behind the camera, I mean, surely at some point, but you'll notice that Irwin Winkler is the producer, his big producer for, you know, Goodfellas and all those. And you can kind of tell, even though it comes from a French director, that it feels like there's some Scorsese touches in it, for sure. Particularly, even if you don't consider this, you know, essential Scorsese by any means, New York, New York, you can kind of sense a lot in this movie. But then there's also the fact that the director is French. Bertrand Tavernier, I believe is his name, who is you can kind of sense there, like mostly in the interior scenes, you almost kind of feel like you're watching a French movie in a sense, just aesthetically, if you know what I mean. I know I'm very much grouping French movies in one place here, but in general, the famous French movies, we'll say. Obviously, that's much more vast than just, you know, interiors look the same and all that, but you get what I mean. And there's a lot of things going on, and it's not just about, you know, him being a tortured soul and all that. There is, one of the things this movie has a lot of acclaim for is just how much the actual music is a focus in it. And it is one of those movies where it's not like pre-recorded. We're actually watching them play in the moment to really give the music in itself the authenticity and make the music a real, actual star of this movie. Considering how secondary the actual music aspect seems to be in a lot of music biopics, or even movies that come off as music biopics that aren't actually. So I think that's, and of course, its score is what won the Oscar, which was by Herbie Hancock, who also plays he's the piano player in the club. And yeah, and so on top of all that stuff, there's also the relationship between him and the French guy, obviously, and his daughter. Much more so, kind of, the relationship between him and the daughter is really interesting to watch, because it's this little actress who's very good and very cute. This was like her only movie ever. She made this movie and then like nobody has any idea whatever happened to her.
Doesn't even have a Wikipedia page.
But it's really nice to watch their relationship, and it's mainly the whole like how she speaks French and he speaks English. He speaks a little French, and there are moments when she kind of teaches him a little bit. But it's interesting to watch this relationship grow between these two people that are really growing close, despite the fact that one speaks mainly French and one speaks mainly English, and how we can still kind of see how the relationship builds despite that. That's its own little subplot I've always really liked and found to be a strong part of this movie. More so than his relationship with Clouzé's character, even. And then, of course, there's Dexter Gordon's performance in itself, which, like I said, obviously is going to have a lot of realism in it, because this is basically who he was, just in movie form, more or less. And it's one of those cases where he's got that his voice is definitely the standout. Like, that's the first thing you notice about him is his voice, and how it really has like that kind of, it has like a worn out sadness to it. Like you know how someone can just have a look on their face and you just kind of know all the shit they've seen and been through. With this, it's his voice. Like, you hear his voice, and like it feels like you know everything this guy's been through in the long life that he's had. But it's not just that; it's also how just how carefully he speaks to, like how carefully he chooses his words and stuff like that. And how you just really kind of, just listening to him, it kind of feels like it gives you a full sense of the character. Like how hard he's been playing his whole life, and then, where the drinking eventually came into it. And just kind of gives it this whole world-weary vibe that he just really, really brings out in a real way. And then there's actual individual scenes, like the scene at the hospital, when he's talking to the doctor. And we're kind of, it's both us and Clouzé's character, we're kind of getting this look at him that none of us have seen before in this scene, where it's kind of like he opens up, and we kind of learn more about him through this scene, not just in what he's saying, but in how he's saying it, and what the performance is saying with it. It's like we're getting a real glimpse of him, kind of for the first time in this movie, like more so than we've been getting. And then there's the follow-up scene in the car when he just says, "You heard me, was I good?" And it was only 4 years later that Dexter Gordon himself died. It was, I think it was technically kidney failure, but he also had cancer too, like in the larynx or something. But still, to get this performance out prior to that is really, I would like to think there was some kind of catharsis or something in playing this part for him, but because it really brings out this world in a really vivid way. And then that's mostly it's just the Paris stuff. There's also the contrast of how we see everything in Paris, and then he eventually goes back to New York, and that's when he meets Scorsese's character. It's so weird to talk about Scorsese strictly as an actor. Where he plays, like, I think he's like an agent of sorts or something. He's like this really, exactly how you'd imagine Scorsese. He's just this live wire that just speaks really fast all the time. And it really kind of shows you that contrast of how the way it was in Paris and kind of that laid-back way, and then when he goes back to New York and it's like just constant hustle and bustle. And Scorsese's performance really brings out, like, Scorsese's performance is almost like it's supposed to be New York personified. And who better to do that than Scorsese, right? And so yeah, it's really nice that not only is he here as an actor, but to kind of see at least a little bit of influence as far as the filmmaking aspect in regards to him, even though it's a seasoned, French director that's been around making it. It is nice to kind of see those touches in there. That may be Winkler at work too, so that's because he is the producer. So, but yeah, it's really it's all about that love for kind of showing the music for what it really is, and not really tampering with that, and showing it as much as they do, and just really, really making a movie that seems like it's about not only about this very human character, and that really his character could be a number of people that have gone through this exact same thing. Obviously, there are plenty of real life figures, jazz musicians in particular. I just reviewed Born to Be Blue a couple of months ago. It's always, if you're a jazz musician that really breaks out, chances are you're going to get a movie made about you that won't have a happy ending, is what Hollywood has taught me. Anyway, but yes, it's really nice the way this movie kind of portrays it, not just like any kind of biopic would do, but it takes this fictional character with a lot of realism in him and really, tells this story in a way that makes you feel like this could be anybody. But really, it feels like such a personal connection with the actor playing the character as well, which makes it feel unique in a sea of movies like this that are very much the same. And needless to say, that's an Oscar nomination really well deserved. Even, I believe that was the Paul Newman year, which we can understand, I guess. So then we go on over to Bird. Clint Eastwood's Charlie Parker movie starring Forrest Whitaker. Okay. So, as far as Bird is concerned, I was talking about, musical biopics kind of feeling all the same. Mm-hmm. Like, every time I go to the ultimate cliche all-time movie biopic, the first thing that comes to mind immediately is Ray. Ray is like I know people love Ray. It was nominated for Best Picture, and Fox won. I know all this. But Ray is what comes to mind when I think of the most fucking bland-ass, cliche-ridden possible biopic you can possibly imagine. And I know it has a huge fan base, but honestly, I don't feel like Bird is too far away from that. I know it is, 1988, I believe. So I don't know if we had as much of these, we had a lot of biopics in the 70s, for sure. We get into biopics forever, but as far as, like, strictly, musical, that kind of have one particular formula, we kind of have, they toss it around a little bit, Eastwood does, which is, it's worth noting, this is kind of the movie where Clint Eastwood had been directing movies since Play Misty for Me. Like, 17 years prior to this? Something like that.
Yeah.
I think Play Misty for Me was like 71 or something. But it really wasn't until this movie where I think, from what I hear, obviously I wasn't still alive yet, but when people started realizing that Clint Eastwood was going to be a serious director. Once again, he'd only make Unforgiven 4 years later. So, he definitely proved it and has continued to. Even this year, he's got a Contender out. But this is kind of where it really kind of came in to say, yeah, Clint Eastwood is here not just as an actor, but as a director to stay. So, obviously, he had been long since proven as an actor in the 60s with the Sergio Leone movies, but as far as a director, he was definitely, this is kind of what solidified that. And as far as a directorial approach, I can get it. I can get the acclaim and the attention it gets. Where it kind of shows us a bit of a different structure, for starters. Because obviously we know the movie is going to be... he played in a club and he wasn't very well received, and he just kind of eventually did it. And then as he got more famous, the more kind of the drug problem came in, and the more he kind of became a harder person to... I mean, well, that's the thing about Whittaker's performance, is the warmth that really does come through. Because typically in these biopics, once people get, alcoholic or drug abuse or whatever, they get violent and they scare everybody and they become unlikable until they just die lonely and fucked up. But even though all the bad shit is starting to happen to him, they never leave the warmth that the character has. Like, the character really does have, a lot in his heart, regardless of what's going on. And the thing about this is the way the addictions are treated, where it's, with, his wife is played by, Diane Venor, who's also very good. And the way their marriage is played up in this movie, obviously we do have scenes where he comes home late and she knows he's fucked up and it's, drama, whatever. But as far as the whole setup to their marriage and how it coincides and coexists with the addictions, it's really one of those cases where it's not like he just wants to indulge. Like, he's not like saying, oh, my life's shit, I'm just going to keep doing this. The addictions to him are just that. They are only in his life because they're addictions, and he can't help them. And he basically just kind of says, well, this is what this is, and I'm going to have to live with it. And the thing that kind of makes us different is his wife basically does the same thing, because she knows that's all she can do. So they're basically just like, she's not like, oh, you have to stop this, and he's like, oh, and then I'm going to make it worse just out of spite or whatever. It's both just something they feel like they just have to live with because they feel so helpless against it. And that's what kind of makes their relationship in the movie so strong, I think. To where we probably could have had a bit more focus on it, given how strong it is when we do see it. But this movie wants to cover a lot. This movie is almost 3 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. And yeah, as you can probably guess by my reaction, it doesn't need it. It doesn't need all that time. I believe its exact runtime is 2:40, 2 hours and 40 minutes, which is very, very long.
It says 1:55 according to this.
Minutes?
Yeah.
On the back here, I think it says, it says 160. But getting into that, as far as the structure goes, typically in biopics like this, we start at the bottom and then we just go. I do kind of like the structure we do here, where we do introduce him kind of where he is now, and then he tries to commit suicide with poison, and then he ends up in the hospital. And once he's at the hospital, and we're kind of cutting back and forth between the past and her trying to get him out of the hospital, is when we get our flashback where he's played by. You could swear it was just like, oh, there's Forest Whitaker, only he just looks a lot younger. Apparently it's his nephew, who also played the young him in Ghost Dog. It's like, they look exactly alike in the movies. They really do. To the point that I had to double check, and I was like, wow, how did they make Forest Whitaker look so young? Oh, no, that's just his nephew, okay. And we have that scene where he's kind of facing off with Keith David a little bit, where Keith David's kind of a somewhat antagonist in these little moments here. He's not in the movie very much, and he's not, a force throughout the movie, but he bookends the movie more or less. As this person that Bird's kind of somewhat proving himself to or something. And there's the whole symbol throw thing, which, to my understanding, Whiplash received criticism for blowing that out of proportion and making it seem like it's this well-known fact in music history that didn't actually happen. But there's something akin to it that is shown here. And yeah, the fact that we don't necessarily get his younger days, or have what motivated him to keep going and all that, until half an hour into the movie. When you get so used to the biopic structure, that's something you can learn to really appreciate, and becomes a strong factor. And anytime a biopic tries to shake it up a little bit is always a nice way to do it. Even we're getting that kind of a lot lately with like Miles Ahead and Jackie trying to shake things up a little bit with how they're done. Yeah, that's another thing, and I know I'm Bird now, but that's another thing I like about Round Midnight too, is that it doesn't go through a whole big span of time. It's just kind of this one little area. I think it's over the span of a few months or something. Whereas, yes, obviously you can tell by Bird's length, just how far we're going. The trouble is that, and it's, well, that's the thing, is I can understand perfectly where the length could be a big factor to make it seem like it's a really long life, because the big thing at the end, where it's just a complete gut punch, where, and this is in the movie, but it's also apparently a very, very true fact, when, Bird's body was so messed up from all the stuff he was doing that when he died, the coroner said estimated age 65, and they said no, he's 34. And it's so it's, when you think about it that way, it is interesting how the movie feels like you've watched a really, really long life, and then because that fact kind of really. Where it's a really, really short life, but it seems like such a long life, and his body physically showed that at the end of his life. That's one of those things where you almost, it's so surreal. It's one of those, to use a cliche, truth is stranger than fiction type things, is what it is. Yes, as I was saying, the performances make it really well. Obviously, I was talking about Whitaker and the warmth he brings, and the way he pictures his addictions. There's actually the scene when it's a cliche now, but the scene when he's in the alley and he's, shooting up or whatever, and the kid sees him, and he does the thing like, "I better never catch you doing this, or I'm gonna haunt you, man." And so he's really trying to get addiction away from anybody he can. He just can't get it away from himself, which is the real heartbreaking thing about that. As I said, there was Diane Minora is really strong as his wife. There's Anna Thompson has a really small part. She always had these kind of small parts in movies like The Crow and Unforgiven, and she's at the very end of Something Wild. All these different. She's the secretary in Bad Boys. I always really liked her when she showed up in movies. Though you don't see her much anymore. Talking about the performances and the stuff that got acclaim, this movie had the weirdest awards run I think I've ever seen. Where, all throughout the award season, it was doing different things. Forest Whitaker won Best Actor at Cannes. Eastwood won Best Director at the Golden Globes. Diane Minora won the New York Critics, which is, one of the biggest critics awards there is. And its Oscar win was for sound. And despite how much it was present in this award season with those, that sound nomination that it won was its only Oscar nomination. Despite all of that, it's so bizarre. It's like I said, it's one of the weirdest awards runs I think I've ever seen. Imagine keeping up with that during the season. That would have been weird. And I do once again, it's not live like it is in Around Midnight, but the reason for that is this really good idea to keep Bird's music alive. So what they did was. When you hear him playing in the movie, it's an actual recording of Charlie Parker. The music for the movie is everything else. So they basically took those recordings of Charlie Parker and took out everything but him. And so the only everything you hear is new except for actually him.
Wow.
That's really cool.
Yeah, very much so.
And then there's the thing where, as far as choosing Eastwood as a director, at very first thought, that's probably interesting to you. But then you kind of think about it and you realize music has always been really apparent in his movies. Mm-hmm. He even scores a lot of them himself. And there's even in movies that he's just in, In the Line of Fire, he's playing piano. And then apparently he saw, from my understanding, this whole fixation on Charlie Parker came about when he actually saw him perform in person when he was a teenager. And so it's ever since that moment, in the 40s, was kind of the egg that this movie eventually hatched from. 40 years later, over 40 years later. However, and it kind of came, his signature dark look kind of came about here too. I was saying, lately it kind of started with Mystic River and then went forward.
Right.
But it's that world that it really kind of recreates this world, that kind of dark look this has, and it's raining a lot. And I really Yeah, it really does make it work a lot. And also, we talk about Eastwood doing music. Don't forget, he just did Jersey Boys.
Yeah.
Like, that was another one where it's like, it's weird he would do that, but Eastwood is very musically motivated, as we can tell. And this was really kind of the first thing that really, really told us that. But yes, despite all this, the length does not do it favors. It is very, like I said, I do like how it kind of does the whole, it makes us feel like 34 was a very, very long life, because that's kind of how it ended up playing out. Was, you know, it feels like we spanned years and years and years, and it really wasn't. I do like that effect, but I mean, as far as, you know, being a movie and getting it going, there's some stuff that probably doesn't need to be, like, there's some stuff where they focus on stuff when they probably could be focusing on other stuff. And it just kind of puts those things in there that just makes it feel like every other biopic, which is unfortunate. For a story that could totally be, you know, really, really unique. And those things certainly do shine through here. But it's just really, you know, that length really, really weighs down on it. But I feel like if it were a 2-hour movie, it would be something, you know, maybe all time something. But, and I do know it does have really big fans, especially, you know, in this area, I imagine. But for me, I do really like those elements that are good about it. But I do feel like there's a lot in here that's weighing it down too. So. Obviously, if I had to choose between the two, I would go with Round Midnight as far as a movie I feel is overall a better portrayal of everything and a better put together movie and all that. But, you know, I have no problem seeing why Bird would have, you know, such devoted fans. So, yeah.
All right. Next week, Versus is going to bring up some Family Spies. Yeah. Enjoy the other content here on the Popcast Network this weekend. AJ's movie reviews came out 2 days ago. We had yesterday's Halloween Horror Nights 26 Popcast, the final one for this season. And we've got Gaming with Ash coming this coming week. We've got the return of Sip and Snack. There's a bunch of cool things coming your way. So stay tuned. A lot of big things coming on the horizon for the Popcast Network. So in the meantime, I want to thank you guys and girls out there for watching. AJ, any parting words?
That's it.